Hunters, what's the creepiest incident you've experienced? I have been hunting most of my life, and I am no stranger to the woods playing tricks on me. Sometimes it is the wind, sometimes it is the way shadows bend, sometimes it is just your mind making you hear things that are not there. But this one was not my imagination. It was bough season, early fall. The air was crisp with that earthy smell you only get when the leaves start dying. I had hiked in a couple miles before dawn, set up in my spot and waited. I had been in position for about 3 hours when the forest changed. Every hunter knows the sound of a living forest. Squirrels chatter, birds call, bugs hum, even the breeze has a rhythm. Suddenly, all of that stopped. Dead silence. The kind of silence where your heartbeat feels too loud. I froze, scanning slowly, expecting maybe a deer creeping in. That is when I smelled it. Metallic like blood mixed with rust. My first thought was maybe a dead animal nearby. I turned my head left, right. Nothing. Then I glanced up. About 30 feet away, high in the crook of a tree, was a man. Not a hunter. No blaze orange. No camo. No gear. Just a man crouched unnaturally high like he belonged there. His clothes looked dark, maybe torn. I could not see his face clearly, but I knew he was watching me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I could not breathe. I blinked, and in that split second of fear, I lost sight of him. When my eyes went back, he was gone. Now the thing about climbing trees in the woods is you hear it. Branches snap, bark, scratches something. But there was no sound, just silence pressing in. I sat frozen for another 10 minutes, every muscle tight, waiting for something else. But nothing, no sounds, no movement. Finally, I decided I was not going to sit there and let whatever that was keep me in its crosshairs. I packed up my gear, moving slow, careful not to make noise, and walked out of those woods with every hair on my neck standing straight. To this day, I do not know who or what I saw, but I will never forget that feeling of being hunted in a place where I thought I was the predator. Next story. A few years back, I decided to hunt elk in Montana solo. I love the quiet, the solitude, the way the forest seems to fold around you when it is just you and the wilderness. That night made me rethink solo trips. I set up camp a good 10 miles from the nearest trail. By the time I finished dinner and settled into my tent, it was past 11 p.m. The fire had burned down, the night was black, and the only sounds were the crickets and the wind in the trees. I drifted off around midnight. I woke to a sound. At first I thought it was part of a dream. Then I sat up and it came again, 3 clear notes whistled low. Not a random bird call. Human. My blood ran cold. Out here nobody should have been close. I grabbed my rifle, sitting in the dark, straining my ears. A minute later again. The exact same pattern, like someone whistling a little tune. I told myself it was the wind or maybe some animal, but my gut knew better. It went on like that for 20 minutes, the same notes, then silence. When the sun came up, I forced myself to check. My camp was circled, human footprints in the dirt. No boots, barefoot. That was my last solo Montana hunt. Next story, I was turkey hunting late one spring evening. The sun was low, the woods golden with that fading light, and I was tucked against a tree by a creek waiting on a gobbler I had been hearing all week. I had just settled my shotgun across my knees when I heard it. Laughter. Not cheerful laughter. Not kids playing. This was deep guttural, like someone trying to mimic a laugh but failing. It rolled through the trees low and heavy. My body stiffened instantly. The first time I thought maybe I imagined it, but then it came again. Louder, closer. It was not the laughter of someone you would want to meet out there. It felt wrong, like it did not belong to the woods. My instinct was to move, but every nerve told me not to. So I sat frozen, gripping my shotgun, eyes darting through the brush. The laughter came once more, and then it cut off mid-breath. Like whoever it was had just stopped or was watching me. The silence afterward was suffocating. No birds, no insects, no creek sounds, just me and the weight of being watched. I stayed until sundown, barely breathing, then hiked out with my finger on the trigger the whole way. I never went back to that spot again. Next story. Coyote hunting at night is one of those things that already feels eerie if you are alone. The darkness seems heavier when all you have is a red light and your own breathing. That night I had set up a predator call about 30 yards from my truck. I was leaned against the tailgate with my rifle scanning through my thermal scope, waiting for eyes to show up. Around 1 a.m. the call was running, and I heard something that froze me. It was not a coyote yip or a bobcat screech. It was a voice. A child's voice. It was faint but clear as day. Just a single word. Hello. I ripped the headset off my ears, thinking maybe it came through my call. But it did not. The sound had come from the tree line in front of me. I stayed dead still, every muscle locked, scanning with my thermal. Nothing. No heat signatures. My dog, who had been sleeping in the truck bed, started growling, low ears back, eyes locked on the same direction. The voice came again, this time softer, almost questioning. Hello, my brain raced. What kid would be out there in the middle of nowhere at 1 a.m.? No houses for miles, no camps, nothing. I did not even pack properly. I just grabbed the call, shoved it in the truck, and drove out of there as fast as I could. Some people told me it was maybe a bobcat or even an owl, since both can sound weirdly human. But nothing in the world will convince me that what I heard was not a child calling out. And that is what makes it worse. Next story. Tracking wounded deer is part of hunting. You follow the signs. You respect the animal. You do your best to finish the job. That is what I was trying to do when this happened. I had shot a decent-sized buck late one afternoon, watched him stumble into the brush, gave it some time, then started tracking. The blood trail was easy, bright red splatters on leaves, drops every few feet, clear hoof prints in the dirt. I followed it for nearly a mile. Then suddenly it just stopped. I mean completely. No more blood, no more tracks. It ended in the middle of a dirt path like someone had picked the deer up and carried it away. I must have circled that spot a dozen times, scanning every direction, but there was nothing. That is when I felt it, that hair-raising sense that you are being watched. I stood there with my bow in hand, every nerve screaming, while the woods around me went dead quiet. I backed out slowly and left. Never did find that deer. What unsettles me the most is not losing the deer. It is the way that trail ended, like it had been erased. Next story, I was hog hunting with a buddy in Texas one night, spotlighting across fields. We were maybe 2 miles from the truck when we heard a scream. Not just any scream. This sounded like a woman being murdered. High-pitched, drawn-out, terrified. My buddy and I froze, looked at each other, and then started running toward the sound. It came again, echoing across the trees. We sprinted through brush, tripping, swearing, convinced we were about to find someone in real danger. But just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Dead silence. We stood there in the dark, rifles up, listening for any movement. Nothing. We waited 10 minutes before turning back, and neither of us felt brave anymore. Later, someone told us bobcats can make screams like that, and I know that is true. But I have heard bobcats before, and this did not sound like an animal. It sounded human. Even now, years later, my buddy and I do not like to talk about it, because deep down we both know whatever we heard that night, it was not just nature. Next story, I was solo camping during deer season, deep in the backcountry. My tent was pitched near a ridgeline, and I had a little fire going until about midnight before turning in. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to footsteps. At first, I thought it might be a deer or maybe a hog nosing around camp. But the steps were heavy, deliberate. Not the quick shuffle of an animal. These were slow, measured human steps. Crunch, crunch, crunch right outside my tent. I froze, listening, every nerve in my body lit up. I grabbed my pistol and waited. The steps circled the tent, pausing on one side, then moving again. My heart was slamming in my chest. Finally, I yelled out, "Hey, who's there?" Silence. The steps stopped completely. I waited a full minute before unzipping the tent, just enough to shine my light. Nothing. No movement. No sound. I did not sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, I stepped out and looked around. The dirt around my tent told me what I already feared. There were footprints. Boots. They walked right up to my tent, but there were no tracks leaving. Next story. My cousin and I split up during a hunt, planning to meet back at camp around noon. Late morning, I crossed a small clearing and came across a man. He was older, maybe in his 60s, wearing torn clothes, no pack, no rifle. Just standing there. I raised my hand and said, "Morning." He looked at me with wide eyes and said he had seen the lights. I thought maybe he was just a local eccentric or maybe lost. I asked if he needed help. He muttered, "They are watching, they always watch," and then turned his head sharply, like he had heard something. I blinked and he was gone. 1 second he was standing there, and when I glanced back, he was not. I spent the rest of that hunt with my cousin at my side. Told him what I saw, but he had not seen anyone all day. Years later, I still wonder, was that guy even real? Next story. It was about 4:30 in the morning, a full moon overhead so bright I did not even need my headlamp as I hiked to my deer stand. The woods were silver quiet except for my own footsteps. About 50 yards ahead on the trail, I saw a tall figure. It was standing perfectly still, dead center of the path. At first, I thought it was another hunter, maybe waiting for me to pass. I called out, "Hey, you out early too?" No response. I took a few steps closer. Still no movement. Just standing there. The air felt wrong. Heavy. My stomach dropped and I knew something was not right. I raised my flashlight and the trail was empty. Nothing there. Just trees and dirt. I stood there for a long time, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But eventually, I forced myself to continue, heart-pounding rifle in hand, the whole way. I have never told anyone about that morning, because how do you explain seeing something that was not there? But I know what I saw, and I will never forget that silhouette standing in the moonlight waiting. Next story. A buddy and I were elk hunting in Colorado and decided to push deeper into the woods than we usually did. We came across what looked like an old logging road and followed it until it ended at a half-collapsed cabin. It looked ancient, roof-sagging boards, missing vines climbing the walls. Naturally, curiosity got the better of us. We pushed the door open and stepped inside. There was nothing inside except for a single wooden chair in the middle of the room and a candle on the floor. The candle was burned almost to the end, wax pooled at the base, but it was fresh. No dust, no cobwebs, no signs of age, like someone had lit it recently. My buddy and I just froze staring at it. The cabin smelled faintly of smoke like it had been burning within the last few hours. We did not say much, just exchanged a look that said we are not supposed to be here. We backed out slowly, rifles ready, and did not stop walking until we hit camp again. Neither of us ever went back to that area. To this day, I wonder who was using that cabin and why they left in such a hurry. Next story. I was bow hunting in the Rockies alone. The trail was rough, snow had just started to dust the ground, and I was miles from camp. About an hour in, I got this strange feeling like something was following me. At first, I brushed it off, but every time I stopped, I could swear I heard something else stop too. Leaves crunching, snow shifting. When I moved, it moved. When I paused, silence. This game went on for almost an hour. My nerves were adrenaline pumping hard enough that I could hear my own pulse. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see a mountain lion or maybe even a bear shadowing me. But there was nothing. Finally, I could not take it anymore. I stopped dead, spun around with my bow drawn, scanning every tree, every bush. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Just the empty woods. That hike back to camp was the longest of my life. Even though I never saw a thing, I swear on my life, something followed me that day. Next story. This one still makes my stomach turn. I was hunting whitetail in the Midwest, deep in a section of woods I had not been in before. I came over a ridge and nearly tripped into a clearing. That is when I saw them. 3 deer carcasses, freshly skinned, hanging from ropes tied to the trees. Their bodies swayed gently in the breeze, blood dripping into the leaves below. I froze, trying to make sense of it. Hunters hang deer, sure, but these had no tags, no gear around, no camp, nothing. Just carcasses hanging like some twisted display. I backed out, quick, heart pounding, but curiosity got me later that day. I brought a ranger back to the spot. We hiked up the ridge and the clearing was empty. No deer, no ropes, no blood. Just bare trees and undisturbed leaves. The ranger gave me a side eye like I was crazy. But I know what I saw. The worst part was the smell of iron and rot lingering in the air even though everything was gone. Next story, I was spotlighting hogs in Texas one night, sweeping a field edge with my light. You know that feeling when you are scanning and your gut tells you to go back over the same spot. That is what happened. On my second pass, I caught a pair of eyes. At first, I figured it was a hog low to the ground, glowing faint red in the light. I raised my rifle, steadying the scope, waiting for it to move. But then the eyes rose, not like an animal standing up, more like something lifting itself. Those eyes went from maybe 2 feet off the ground to 6, then blinked once and vanished. I waited, heart racing, but nothing else moved. No sound of retreating hooves, no brush breaking, just gone. I left after that. Could not bring myself to spotlight again for weeks. To this day, I have no clue what I saw, but I will never forget those eyes climbing into the dark. Next story. There is a big oak near my favorite deer stand. One morning, just as the sun was breaking, I noticed an owl perched high in its branches. I love seeing owls. Usually they are a good omen. But this one felt wrong. For one, it was massive. I do not mean barn owl big. I mean too big. Its body was almost the length of my torso. It just sat there staring. Did not move, did not blink. And strangest of all, it was completely silent. No rustle of wings, no occasional hoo. Nothing. Every time I looked away and then glanced back, it seemed closer. First up on the high branch, then halfway down, then on a lower limb. By the time I realized it was moving without sound, my hands were shaking. I climbed down and left the woods entirely that day. Some friends laugh and say I just spooked myself, but I know owls. That thing was not acting like one. Next story. This one still makes my skin crawl. I was exploring a thick patch of woods trying to get to a new ridge I had scouted on the map. The ground was damp and the smell of rot was heavy. About halfway through, I saw them. Boots. Not sitting boots, not abandoned gear. They were sticking straight up from the dirt toes, pointed to the sky like someone had buried a body feet first. They looked weathered, maybe military style, but I could not see much of the leather under the mud. I stood there frozen because part of me thought if I tugged them, something would come out of the ground. I turned back, deciding not to mess with it. When I brought a friend back a couple of days later, there was nothing there. No boots, no disturbed earth, just leaves and roots like the forest had swallowed them whole. He laughed, said, I must have been tired or imagined it. But I know what I saw. Boots sticking out of the ground like someone was trapped beneath. Next story, I was elk hunting in Colorado solo. My camp was just a tent near an old logging road. A few hundred yards down from me was a cabin, abandoned, half-collapsed roof caved in. The first night I kept hearing faint tapping. At first I thought it was a branch hitting my tent, but every time I stepped outside the sound stopped. On the second night I heard the tapping again, this time farther off. It was not the tent. It was coming from the cabin. I walked over, flashlight in hand, rifle slung. The tapping was steady, rhythmic. When I reached the cabin, I aimed the light at the broken window. That is when I froze. A pale face, just barely visible through the glass. Not moving, not blinking, just staring. I bolted back to camp, packed up and hiked out before sunrise. Folks later told me no one had lived in that cabin for 40 years. But I will swear on my life, someone was watching me through that window.